Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at Keep the Heroes Out, a 1 to 4 player deck building tower defense game. And a disclaimer that I was sent a review copy of this one. I find the art in Keep the Heroes Out completely adorable, but do the gameplay mechanics stand up as well? Let's find out and get to the list. So for my number 5 point, I'm focusing on the deck building in the game, and for my taste, this is a pro. So you have a fairly small deck of upgrade cards that can be used by all of the factions, divided into 4 types. You have some fairly consistent cards, which could be seen as a negative. You're going to see a lot of the same stuff each game. But they work in combo very differently depending on which faction you're playing, so there is some variety in the cards that way. And something else I like that I haven't quite seen before is that deck building is actually tied to the board and actions with the board, because certain locations will create resources your characters can carry with them, and then they have to bring them to other rooms to actually deck build into certain types of cards. So it's a nice little riff on the traditional deck building. You don't have money cards kind of cluttering up your deck. It's pretty cool. My next point, number 4, which is a bit of a mix for me, is focus on your goal in the game, keeping the heroes out. And basically when you get down to it, this game is sort of like a tower defense game. These heroes will be popping up based on this deck of cards, and they'll be trying to defeat your minions, loot your treasure chests, and eventually advance into the treasure room. If they can get in there, they win. And on the positive side, trying to fight against these heroes, trying to winnow down their numbers, placing your people strategically to act as blockers because they can take damage instead of letting the heroes advance. That's all pretty cool. And there's also a good amount of predictability and strategy in the cards if you want to look at them that way, because you know exactly where they could show up and what types could be there. So as the deck goes through, you have a better chance of guessing right and protecting certain spots. But on the negative side, sometimes luck does rear its ugly head, and the exact wrong cards keep getting drawn at the wrong time. Sometimes that can wipe you off the board, which means you are totally on the wrong foot for your next turn. And sometimes the game, this happens very often, can just end with a sudden victory that can really catch you flat-footed. It's very tough, especially at the higher difficulty settings. So that's something to be aware of. My number 3 point, which is also going to be a mix for my taste, is the cooperative experience in the game for multiple players. And on the positive side, the cooperation can be really cool here. You can get resources for each other to help other people deck build. You can put down little teleporting portals to help kind of streamline movement for everybody else. And of course, you have to coordinate who's guarding where and who's protecting where so you don't lose the game. But on the negative side, the downtime in the game while you wait for each player to play out their cards one by one can be pretty crushing, especially when you're first learning, and especially with 3 or 4 players. These turns can really go long. You know how deck builders are, especially when you get into combos and upgraded cards and stuff. Now, there is an official variant the designer put out that has basically 2 players act as sort of a combined single player where they each have 3 cards a turn instead of 5. It works pretty well and does cut down the downtime significantly, especially for 2 players. But I will say I don't love it because only having 3 cards at a time does significantly cut down on the interestingness of your turn and the combos you can play. So it's a bit of a mixed bag there. Getting to my number 2, and this one is a pro, and maybe one of the biggest selling points of the game for me, and that's the variety in your characters and scenarios. So there are 9 factions, 9 monsters you can play as in the game, which is great. Such a huge number for a pretty small game. Each of them has a different number of meeples. Each of them has different life values, a unique deck with different actions in it, unique generic actions that'll interact with the upgrade cards differently. Now, are all of them fully balanced for my plays? I don't know. Definitely not for every scenario. And some of them I do find less fun or less consistently useful than others, but still there's 9 of them. So even if there's a few in here that are a bit of clunkers, it's a great value and a lot of fun to mix and match them. And then on top of that, you've got this scenario book of 20 scenarios. And again, is every single one a winner? Not necessarily, but it's such a great value. You have completely different dungeon makeups. You have special rules, unique cards that go in the enemy spawning deck. It really makes things fun to mix and match again, to try different things, try different difficulty levels with the same scenario, different monsters with the same scenario. Just a lot of fun modularity in the game overall. And finally, my number 1 for Keep the Heroes Out, which is also a pro for me, is the tactical card play. So even at the start of the game, you have interesting choices with your cards because they have these icons, but it's not like a lot of deck builders where, you just play the card and it's very obvious what it does. Here you often have options of different actions to take, and then the board play is very interesting, moving around, activating the rooms, getting different tokens to upgrade to different cards. And this only becomes more exciting and more fun as you get those upgrade cards, give you more cards to play. Now, this does play into the downtime issue I mentioned earlier. I've had games where one player would go through their entire 15 or 20 card deck every turn. So, the awesome combos can be negative in a way. But it doesn't change the fact that with these unique factions, you have really interesting choices of what to do with your cards. And that's just something that, tends to be very rare in deck builders. Usually the cards kind of play themselves. And here that is not the case. Really great tactical puzzle every turn. So you might want to keep the heroes out if you really like faction variety, if you like combo-licious card-playing turns, or if you just like really good tactical puzzles that are also pretty accessible for family weight players. But on the other hand, you might want to avoid this one if you don't like sometimes frustrating card luck or swingy losses, or if you're a deck building game fan who wants tons of culling and adding cards to your deck to like build a streamlined engine. The deck building is not really the main focus here. And if you want to see the game in action, Colin did a play on this channel, and we also have several plays on the streaming channel. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.